Everybody is here. Perfect. So let's start. One, I hear a background noise. Can you? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Hello. Welcome to another exciting LinkedIn Live event with my dear panelists who are all flow graduates and coaches and also who have their expertise in different areas. You will get to know them in a few seconds. But before we start, I just would like to remind all of us about what we're going to discuss today. We will discuss about the Great Resignation and a need for cultural transformation, which takes me back to many years ago, to my own experience about why I left the corporate world 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago now. Can you believe? And I thought about it. I reflected on that when we were preparing for our discussion today. And the main reason why I really left my corporate job, my
And
corporate
a
executive
need
job, was
for cultural
really the culture
transformation, which
and the
takes me back
misalignment that
to
I had. I
many years
felt with
ago,
my values,
to
and
my
I didn't
own
feel like I was
experience
growing, I was
about
learning, and I
why
didn't feel like
I left
I had a
the
future
corporate
there.
world
So
15
today,
years ago,
what we're
16,
going to
17
discuss
years
is
ago now. Can
what
you
is it
believe?
that
And
leads to
and
this
I thought
great
about it. I reflected
resignation
on that
since the
when we
beginning of
were
the pandemic.
preparing
And
for
in
our discussion today. And the
2021, two
main
years
reason
ago,
why I really
the
left
turnover
my corporate job, my corporate
numbers are
executive job, was really
huge.
the
It reached
culture
to its peak
and
for
the
since the
misalignment that
Industrial
I had. I
Revolution in the
felt with my values, and I
57.3,
didn't feel like
and
I
in
was
some
growing,
industries
I
like
was
retail,
learning,
it
and I
reached
didn't
to
feel like
60%. And
I had a
last year's
future there.
figures are not
So
very
today,
like
what we're
clear
going to
yet, but
discuss is
we
what
have
is it that,
similar
that
figures. So
leads
what
to
is
the
it
great resignation
that
since the
causes
beginning of the
people
pandemic.
to
And in
want to leave? And I
2021,
would
two
like
years
to
ago,
introduce, my
the
name is Talyaa
turnover
Vardar, by the way, for those of you who
numbers
don't
are
know me. I am a
huge.
Master
It reached
Certified
to
Coach
its peak
working with
for
leaders of
since
the
the Industrial
organizations, many
Revolution in the
organizations from across the
57.3,
world.
and in
I
some
live in
industries
Toronto with
like
my family,
retail,
and I'm also
it
one of the
reached to
founders of the Flow
60%.
Coaching
And
Institute.
last year's figures
And
are not
I would like to
very,
start
like,
with
clear
Joelle, our
yet, but
youngest
we
member
have
and
similar figures.
panelist,
So
who
what is
is
it
a millennial and
that
who herself joined
causes people
the
to
Great
want to
Resignation
leave?
movement? Joelle, can
And
you
I would
introduce
like
yourself?
to introduce, my
Yes,
name
thank
is
you so
Talyaa
much,
Vardar,
Talia,
by the
for the
way. For those of you
opportunity.
who don't
Hi,
know me, I am a
everyone.
master
So I'm
certified coach
also
working with
a
leaders
coach
of the
certified by Flow
organizations, many
Coaching, and I'm in the
organizations
process
from
of getting my
across the world.
ACPC. And
I live
I
in
come
Toronto with
from a
my
background
family,
of
and I'm also one
marketing
of
and
the founders of the
communications, and
Flow
was
Coaching
working mainly in
Institute. And
agencies
I would like to start
and
with
yeah, I
Joelle, our
am part
youngest
of this
member
generation
and
that's
panelist, who is
leaving
a
the
millennial
job
and
mainly
who
for
herself
the same
joined
reason that you said,
the
Talia,
Great
the
Resignation
values
movement.
misalignment, but
Joelle,
also
can
the
you
search for
introduce
more
yourself?
flexibility. Yes, thank you so much, Talia, for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. So I'm also a coach certified by Flow Coaching, and I'm in the process of getting my ACC. And I come from a background of marketing and communications,
Yeah.
and was
Could
working
you
mainly
also
in
say a few words
agencies.
about your job
And yeah, I am
before?
part
Because it's
of
very
this
much relevant
generation
to what we're going to
that's
talk
quitting their
about.
job mainly for the same reason that you said, Talia, values misaligning, but also the search for more flexibility. So I live in Montreal, but I'm right now located in Nicaragua. So this search of flexibility and allowing for more autonomy was definitely part of me wanting to move towards a new path.
Yeah. Can you also say a few words about your job, what you're doing, Joelle? Because it's very much relevant to what we are going to talk
Oh
about.
yeah, for sure. I'm now a career coach, so I work with on the employee side of things, mainly with job seekers, mainly in the tech field. So people who have completed a boot camp with Concordia boot camps, and they are looking for a new role in data science or in as a web developer. And so I work with them. So I see day to day on the employer side of things with with people who are seeking employment, what they're looking for, and this has shifted drastically in the past 2 years for sure.
Thank you, Joelle. And I would like to introduce Joanne to you because Joanne today represents the employer perspective. She is an HR director. She's a flow coach, but an HR director and a menopause doula. How cool is that? So, Joanne,
Oh, thank you, Talya, and welcome to everyone for joining us today. And I'm happy to be here. And oh my God, you said menopause on a live thing. Wow, there's so much stigma around it. And being a perimenopausal woman, I that's my passion is helping other women through that very. It's like an abyss, but there's no information out there for us, and it's very muddled. But I'm here from an HR perspective. I've
Thank you.
been working in
So,
HR
Ed,
for 20 plus
my
years, and
seasoned
I can certainly say the
colleague,
Great Resignation is here.
many years
We
of
are all
leadership
experiencing it.
development
It's a real challenge
experience, many years
just to keep
of
up with the
working
demands.
with
And
executives and
yeah, our
listening
workforce
to
is changing,
their
and they're demanding
challenges
the
and
changes. And
desires
if
on a
employers
daily
aren't
basis.
going to listen,
Can you introduce
give that
yourself?
flexibility, autonomy, recognition, and so on, they're going to lose good people.
thank you, Joanne. Thank you. So, Ed, my seasoned colleague, many years of leadership development experience, many years of working with executives and listening to their challenges and desires on a daily basis. Um, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks. Well, it's good to be with everybody, be with my colleagues, and talk about this really relevant and important topic. It really is around some of the themes that I have given my professional career to. Uh, One way to look at this is that many of us made some of the biggest decisions of our lives when we barely knew ourselves. You know, we're right out of university, we're having to make a career decision, perhaps relationship decisions. And some years later, we know ourselves better. And we realize that perhaps we went into a particular field because the income potential or because of the parental pressure, all those kind of reasons. And people come to a point where they have to decide what do I want? You know, the question that many ask is, what am I going to be when I grow up? And you can ask that question at 60 just as well as you did at 20. So a lot of my coaching, especially through my company Second Rodeo, originally was to help executives in a succession transition figure out how to move towards something and not just feel like they were leaving something. Many of the companies I worked with are privately held, and so you know, there's a single owner, and
And in
identifying who's
thinking
going to be
about it,
developed to take the company
what
forward
is a
is the easy
culture?
part. It's getting the old man, and it's almost
And what
always
is
an
a
old man,
company? What is an
to move on.
organization? It's a
But then I
system.
realized that the same
And at the
issues are
core of
happening
it is
mid-career. People are really waking up to the
individual,
fact
the
that
individual. So
this is not how
systems
I
are made
really
of
am wired.
companies,
And of course, the
organizations
pandemic
are made of
really gave
people
us some space and time
and
to think,
individuals
which I
and
think was a big catalyst
relationships
for what we're experiencing.
and
So I think
interactions, daily
themes
interactions.
of passion
So
and purpose
I
are
would like
more
to
important than ever
start
before.
with
Mhm.
you, Joanne.
Thank you, Ed.
By the way, before we
Um,
start, I also
I
want to
mean,
say
thinking
we
about it,
received
like,
questions, very
what is a culture?
sophisticated questions.
And what is a
Soon we
company?
will
What is
start
an
to answer those
organization? It's a
questions
system. And
from
at the core of it
the
is
people that
there
registered, that
is
signed up.
individual, the
But
individual.
in the
So
meantime, as
systems are
we
made of
speak,
the
as we
companies,
discuss,
organizations
if
are made
you
of
have
people
comments
and
and
individuals and
questions, please
relationships.
type your
and interactions,
comments in
daily
the comments
interactions. So
section.
I
And
would
what
like to
happens is
start
our
with
tech person, there's a
you,
tech
Joanne. And
person
by the way, before we
helping
start,
us
I
steer
also want to
this
say we
call,
received
and he
questions,
will
very
bring them to the
sophisticated
screen, and he will
questions.
be able to answer your
Soon we will
questions. So
start to
please
answer those
feel free
questions
to interact with
from
us today. We
the
would
people
love
that
to
registered,
hear
that
from you.
signed up. But
So,
in the meantime, as
I
we
want to
speak,
start with
as
you,
we
Joanne,
discuss,
because
if you
earlier
have
when we
comments
discussed
and
the
questions,
impact
please type
of this
your
high
comments
turnover
in the
and the
comments
great resignation movement,
section. And what
um,
happens is
you
our
shared
tech
with me
person, there's
some
a
of the
tech
challenges
person
as an HR
helping us
from the
steer
employer's
this
perspective
call,
that you have
and
been
he will
going through.
bring them to the
So,
screen, and we will
what do
be
you
able to
think
answer your questions.
are
So
some
please
aspects
feel
of
free to
organizational
interact with
culture
us today. We
that,
would
that
love to
indeed
hear from you.
were established in the
So
times of the
I
19th
want to
century,
start with
the
you, Joanne,
Industrial
because
Revolution
earlier
times.
when
So,
we
what is it that
discussed
leads
the impact
to
of
such
this high
an
turnover and
existential
the Great
crisis
Resignation
and
movement,
movement
um,
during the
you shared
pandemic,
with
and
me
since
some
then
of the
everything is
challenges
different.
as an HR
Wow, loaded
from the
question for
employer's
sure.
perspective that you have been going through.
But you
Thank
live
you.
it
So,
on a daily basis.
what do
That's
you
why I
think
want to ask you.
are some
Yeah,
It's your
aspects
yeah.
of
reality.
organizational cultures
Um,
that
there's
that
so many
indeed
things that come
were
into play here.
established in the
You
times
know,
of
I've
the
been
19th
throughout my
century,
career,
the
been
Industrial
told, well,
Revolution
that's how you do things.
times. So, what is it that
You know,
leads
we've always done it that
to
way. That
such
lack of innovative
an
or creative thinking or
existential
thinking outside
like
of the box or
crisis and
even being
movement
open to change. It's
during
human
the
nature to
pandemic, and
revert back
since
to
then
what they
everything is
know.
different?
Wow,
I think
loaded
a
question
big
for
part of it,
sure.
you know, I read a great book called
Well,
I
you
think,
live it on a
uh,
daily basis. That's why I want to ask you
yeah,
your
I think,
about
reality.
psychological safety in the
Yeah.
workforce.
um,
If
well,
people
there's
don't
so many
feel
things that
safe
come
to
into
speak
play
up,
here.
that is
You know,
going
I've
to
been
halt
throughout my career, I've been
innovation,
told, well, that's the way we
creativity,
do things.
um, and
You
people
know,
will
we've always
leave.
done it that way.
The
That lack
fearless
of innovative or
organization,
creative
Amy
thinking or
Edmondson
thinking outside of the
spoke about
box or
this, and she
even being open to
referenced
change. It's human nature to revert
due
back
to
to
a
what they
lack
know.
of uh,
I think a
during
big part
it
of
was
it, you
March
know, I read a
27th,
great book called
1977, the Tenerife airport
uh,
disaster. Now, some of you folks
so
listening
I
may
have to
not
find it here,
be old enough to
about
know
psychological
or know
safety in the
that, but
Yeah,
workforce.
the
yeah.
co-pilot did
If
not feel
people
safe
don't
enough to
feel
speak up to the
safe to
pilot
speak
to
up,
stop that, and
that is
it
going
caused a
to
disaster. And
halt
Amy Edmondson
innovation,
speaks about this in her
creativity,
book. It's a
um,
fantastic book. So the
and people will
psychological
leave.
safety piece in the workforce
The
is
Fearless
huge.
Organization,
Mm-hmm.
Amy Edmondson
Thank
spoke
you,
about
Joanne.
this, and she
So,
referenced
I mean, I have a lot of case
due to a
studies
lack
with
of
that,
uh,
the,
during it was
that
March
explains the
27th,
relationship,
1977, in the
so
Tenerife
specific
airport
relationships,
disaster. Now,
and
some
culture
of you
again,
folks
the
listening may not
psychological safety.
be old enough to
So
remember that
Joelle,
or know that, but
thinking about
the
different
co-pilot did not feel
generations
safe
and
enough
being
to
a
speak up to
millennial,
the
I'm
pilot
Gen
to
X,
stop that, and
and
it caused a
Joanne is Gen
disaster.
S,
And this
and Ed,
Amy
I would
Edmondson
call him as
speaks
Gen
about
X,
this in
but
her
he
book. It's a
says that he's a
fantastic book.
boomer.
So the
So
psychological
we have
safety
three
piece in the workforce
generations
is
here,
huge.
even in this room, and
Hmm.
my daughter is Gen
Thank you,
Z,
Joanne.
so it's
So,
going to be a different
I
culture.
mean, I have a lot
What
of
do you
case
think
studies with that,
would
you know,
create a
the
psychological
that
safety in
explains the
organizations?
relationships.
What is
It takes
the
us to
need
the
there?
relationships, you know, and culture
I think
again, the
something that
psychological
I see in
safety.
my
So,
practice is
Joel,
that
thinking
all the
about different
generations are kind
generations
of
and being a
beneficial.
millennial,
It's
I'm
a,
Gen
it's
X,
beneficial for
and Joanne
everyone,
is Gen X, and
but
Ed, I would call
employees are
him as Gen
asking
X, but
right
he
now. So
says that he's a
yes,
boomer.
millennials are kind of
So we have
pushing
three generations
it
here,
maybe
even in this
further
room.
than
And
what
my daughter
companies are
is Gen
expecting.
Z,
But
so
in my
it's going to
practice,
be a
I see
different
a lot of
culture.
Gen X
What do you
and even
think
boomers
would
embracing
create a
all that is
psychological
being
safety in
asked,
organizations? What is
which
the
is
need there?
trust. I think something that I see in my practice is that all the generations are kind of beneficial. It's beneficial for everyone what the employees are asking right now. So yes, millennials are kind of pushing it maybe further than what companies were expecting, but in my practice, I see a lot of Gen X and even boomers
Thank you,
embracing
Joel. So
all that is
in my
being
experience,
asked,
especially,
which
I'm
is
in the middle. I have teams
trust and
that are
autonomy
millennial.
and
I have teams
flexibility,
that
but
are
also
baby
a
boomers,
culture of
and I ran
accountability.
those
So
teams.
I think Joanne is
there are a
absolutely
lot of
right. The need
assumptions
to,
when
when
a
you
person
speak
is
up,
young.
feel
We assume that
heard
the
and feel
person
like your
doesn't
opinion
have an
matters and
opinion.
feel like you're part of
Then
building
there
this
are
company
assumptions because
culture
that's
and
how we were
decisions
raised.
are being
However,
made with
everybody has an
your
opinion.
intel being
So, or
considered, I think is one
the
main
other
thing
assumption is
that
like
they're asking.
from the younger generations,
Thank you, Joelle.
societies
So
view
in
if
my
a person
experience,
is
especially, I'm in the
experienced
middle. I have
or maybe
teams that are millennials.
seasoned,
I have teams that are
they might
baby
have some
boomers,
assumptions
and I
that
ran
the
those teams.
person's opinions are
So
outdated.
there are a lot of
So all of those
assumptions when a
assumptions
person is
takes us
young.
to
We
indeed
assume that the person
listening with
doesn't have an
curiosity,
opinion.
which is a great
We-
coaching skill.
that there are
Ed,
assumptions because
what would
that's
you
how we
say
were
about
raised.
this?
However,
Well,
everybody has an
so much of the
opinion.
work I've
So,
done
or
has
the other
the
assumption
presenting
is like
issue as a
from
consultant
the
was around
younger
successional
generations,
planning.
the
Culture was
side is
always in
maybe
the background.
if a
So
person
in our
is
initial assessment,
experienced
we'll interview
or
people
maybe
across the organization, and we
seasoned,
define culture
they
as,
might have
just
some
as Joanne said,
assumptions
it's
that
the way we
the
do things
person's
around here.
opinions are
So we'll ask
outdated.
questions
You
like,
know,
what will get you
so
promoted
all
around
of
here?
those
What
assumptions,
will
it
get you
takes
fired
us
around
to
here?
indeed
How is conflict
listening with
managed here? These
curiosity,
kind of questions.
which is
And
a great coaching
our
skill.
experience
So,
is
Ed,
that the
what
people at
would
the
you
top of
say
the
about this?
organization have a
Well,
completely
so much of the
different
work I've
perspective
done
than
has,
the vast majority of the
if the
rest of the
presenting
organization.
issue
I
as
think
a
it's true
consultant
that
was around
when you
succession
sit in a
planning,
senior
culture is
position,
always
you know
in the
less
background.
about the organization
So
than
in
the
our
people.
initial
And so we make
assessment,
those
we'll interview
assumptions,
people
senior leaders
across
make
the
those
organization,
assumptions,
and we
and they're
define
purely assumptions.
culture
They don't
as,
have to,
just
they
as
don't
Joanne
prove
said, it's the
that
way we do
other
things around
generations
here.
haven't
So we'll ask
experienced those
questions
things
like, what
matter.
will get you promoted
We
around
know
here?
best, and
What will
it's
get you
that
fired around
attitude
here? How is
that I think
conflict
is being
managed here?
challenged, and
These
people
kind
are
of
going to really,
questions,
in
and,
some
and our
industries, a
our
really big
experience
wake-up
is
call
that the
of
people at the
people
top of the
saying we're not going
organization
to deal with
have
this
a
anymore.
completely different
And so I
perspective
think
than
people are
the vast
finally
majority of the
starting to
rest of the
wake up.
organization. I think it's
Senior
true
leaders,
that
and I'm
when you
just
sit in a
painting with a
senior
broad brush
position,
here, but a lot
you
of
know
people
less
who have
about the organization than you
previously
think you do.
explained away what
And
it is
so we
going on
make
now
those
and say,
assumptions,
maybe
senior
I
leaders
am
make those
part of the problem.
assumptions, and they're purely
Thank
assumptions.
you,
And it's
Ed.
not that they don't think
We
that the other
recently,
generations have opinions, they
at
just
the
don't think
Flow
they
Coaching
matter.
Institute, we ran
We
a
know best.
survey
And it's that
with
attitude
our
that,
clients, executive
that I think is
clients,
being challenged. And people are getting
followed
a
by
really, in some industries,
Zoom,
a really
but
rude wake up
live
call of people
focus
saying, we're
groups,
not going to
in-depth
deal
focus
with this
groups to
anymore. And so
probe
I think people
further.
are
But
finally
the
starting
focus,
to wake
the
up,
common themes that
senior
came
leaders.
up
And I'm
at the end of
painting
the
with a
survey.
broad brush here, but a lot of
So
people
there
who
are
have
some
previously
there are
explained
some
away whatever's
top
going on are now having to say, maybe
challenges that
I
were
am part of
shared
the
by
problem.
the executives as
Thank you,
an
Ed.
impact as a result of
We
the Great
recently
Resignation, or what
at the
leads
Flow
to Great
Coaching Institute, we
Resignation is
ran a survey with
resilience
our
comes,
clients, executive
and
clients,
as some
followed
of the
by
things that
remote
people
but
have to
live
feel like they have
focus
to
groups, in-depth focus groups
really
to
deal with
probe
more
further about
challenges than
the
before,
topics,
and
the common
emotion,
themes
and
that came
amongst
up
that the
at the end
emotional
of the
challenges
survey.
also, and
So
stress
there are
and
some
anxiety
five,
are really
there are some top
very big.
challenges
And the
that were
other
shared
thing,
by the
I
executives
think, which
as
also
an
might be
impact as
related
a
to
result of the Great
working remote,
Resignation, or
but
what
also
leads to Great Resignation,
maybe
is
also might be related to
resilience
just
comes
focusing only on
as
profit,
some of the things, like people
versus
have to feel like
balancing
they
that
have
with
to
human
really deal with more
aspect of
challenges
human.
than before,
So
and
it
emotion,
is
and
called
amongst that
disconnect.
the emotional
More and
challenges
more
also,
employees
and
feel
stress and anxiety
disconnected
are really
from their
very big.
organization, from the
And the other
management,
thing, I
and
think, which
and
also might be
isolation,
related to working
sense of
remote, but
isolation,
also
lack of
maybe also might be related to just
the
focusing
opportunities to
only on
grow
profit,
and learn came up, especially
versus
from the millennials, because
balancing
they
that
want to be
with
coached and mentored
human
by
aspect of the
their
things.
managers.
So
And
it is called
so
disconnect.
they really
More
wanted to
and
be
more
connected. And
employees
another
feel
survey,
disconnected
which
from their
found that
organization,
94%
from the
of the
management,
surveyed employees
and
responded
an
that they would stay
isolation,
longer if their company invested
sense
in
of
their learning.
isolation, lack of
So, and I don't know if it is a
the
North American
opportunities to
thing, because
grow
we work with
and learn came up,
organizations
especially
in
from the
leadership
millennials.
development,
They said they want to be
psychological
coached and
safety,
mentored
team building, coaching,
by their
leadership
managers.
trials, different
And
things. So I'm
so
not sure,
they
but
really wanted to be
Joan,
invested.
what would
And
you say,
another
like, do you
survey report found that 94% of the surveyed employees responded that they would stay longer if their company invested in their learning.
particularly the Gen Zs and
So,
younger generation,
and
they
I don't know
want
if it
that
is a North
development. And as
American
people
thing
manage,
because
that's our
we
job.
work with
That should be our focus, is
organizations in
developing our
leadership
employees, and that's how
development,
we'll have a better chance of
psychological
retaining them.
safety, team building,
They not only want
coaching,
it, they expect it.
leadership styles,
And
different things.
if you
So
think
I'm
about it,
not sure, but
60% of our
Joan,
time
what would you say?
is
Like, do
spent
you
at work. Maybe
really
more
think
even
that
with what we have now
more people
with
would
the
stay if they felt like they were
technological
invested?
devices we have.
Absolutely.
So it's such a
If
big
they're
chunk of
particularly
our time, if you
the
think
Gen
about it.
Zs and
And
younger generation,
and I'm
they want
hearing
that
like
development.
things
And
like,
as people managers, that's our job. That should be our
video
focus, is
learning and
developing our
etc.
employees,
all
and
of
that's
those
how we
things.
will have a
But
better chance of retaining them.
speaking
They
to
not only
our
want it, they
focus
expect it.
group results, the
Mhm.
sense of
And
isolation and
so if you
disconnect,
think
I'm not
about
sure
it,
how much of it
60%
could
of
be
our
addressed
time
with
is
those like,
spent at work, maybe more
videos
even with,
or like apps or
with
whatever. It's the human connection I feel like
technological devices we
we're
have.
longing
So
for.
it's such a
So
big
what would you
chunk
say
of
about
our
that,
time, if
Ted?
you think about it. And just, and I'm hearing like
Yeah, I
things
think
like,
very much a human
uh,
need, not just
video
a need
learning
of
and
any
etc.,
particular
all of those
generation.
things. But um,
The challenge is people
speaking
that
to
get
our
promoted. If you're an
focus group
outstanding
results, the
individual
sense of
contributor, you get
isolation and
promoted to a
disconnect, I'm
management
not
role.
sure how much
Nobody
of
really
it could be
teaches you how to
addressed
manage.
with
No one
those,
teaches you
like,
how to be in the people business,
videos or like apps or
particularly the more
whatever.
technical you
It's the
feel. So you
human
kind of go back
connection
to do
I
what you were
feel
good
like
at, what you were
we're
rewarded with
longing
before.
for.
So there has to
So,
be some
what
kind of
would you say
significant
about that,
investment
Ed?
in people understanding my new role and how
Yeah, I
critical
think it's
that
very
role
much
is.
a human need, not just
Knowing people.
a need of any particular
There is,
generation.
anyone who's a parent knows that
You know, the
every
challenge
one
is
child,
people
they're
that
very
get,
different, and you
if
can't
you're an
parent the same
outstanding
style with
individual
each child. It's the
contributor,
same
you
with
get promoted to a
employees.
management
They
role.
all have specific
Nobody
needs, they
really
all have
teaches you
specific
how to
aspirations,
manage.
they
No
all
one
have
teaches you
specific
how to be
desires,
in the people
and
business,
knowing what those are
particularly
is
the more
part of
technical your field. So you kind of go back to do what you were good at,
and
what you
so
were rewarded
I
with
think that's
before.
one place to
So there
think
has to
about
be some
making
kind
a
of
change
significant
if I were to
investment in
present from
people
a
understanding
division
my new
perspective,
role
is
and
how
how
to invest
personal
in those
that
people
role
who are
is.
frontline. You know,
Um,
and you say you should mentor
knowing
more.
people.
I mean,
There
that's
is,
how
if
to
anyone
mentor
who's a
is. You
parent
don't
knows
mentor.
that
I mean,
if you have
knowing
more than
people
one
that really
child,
know how to do
they're very
that,
different,
also
and you can't parent
have
in the
that
same style
experience.
with
So we're
each
asking,
child.
in
It's the
any
same
case,
with
of
a group of
people
employees.
to
They
do
all have
things
specific
that
needs,
have
they
no
all have specific
context,
aspirations,
no
they all have
experience,
specific
no training.
desires.
And
And
also
knowing what
one
those
thing
are
that
is
I have
part of
heard in
being
the
a
past
manager,
a
being a
lot
leader.
is like I
And
don't
so
have time
I think that's
to
one place
mentor,
to think about making
coach
a
my
change
employees,
if I were looking at it from an
and they might be
organization
right.
perspective,
But
is how to invest in those
when
people who
you
are
approach it
frontline.
from a
You know,
systemic
and you say you
perspective
should
and
mentor more. I
design,
mean, who knows how to mentor if you weren't mentored? I mean, the only people that really
evidence-based
know how to do that are those that have
tools
had that experience. So we're
that
asking in
exist,
many cases people
then it
to
will
do
be
things for
different.
which they
Then
have no
they won't
context,
find
no
it difficult
experience,
to
no
find
training.
time.
Yeah.
And also,
It's the
one
old
thing
adage
that I
that what gets rewarded
heard in
gets
the past
repeated.
a lot is like,
And
I don't have
When you
time
don't,
to
you know,
mentor,
we tell
to
people you should
coach
do
my
this, but that's not
employees,
what they're being measured on. It's
and
not
they
the
might be
cloud where
right.
performance is measured.
But
So there's not a high priority in
when
that.
you approach it from a
And also the
systemic
skill set,
perspective and design,
investing in
you
people
know,
managers that have
and
impact
open
to
space for the
culture,
use of these tools and
is very
that
important,
exist,
and making sure that
then it
they
will
have
be
the
different.
right
Then,
skill set.
they won't find
It's
it
part of
difficult
their
to
job.
find time.
Yeah, it's the old
managing
adage that
a
what
function,
gets
but
rewarded gets
through
repeated.
people.
Yeah.
So that's
And
very important.
when we
So
don't,
I want to start
you know, we
with
tell
the
people you
questions
should do
that's
this,
been
but that's not what they're being
requested.
measured on.
Yes,
That's not
thank you
how their
very much.
performance is measured.
Simon
So there's not a
Tompkins,
high
to
priority in
what
that.
extent do
Yeah.
companies
Yeah.
around
And
the
also
world
the skill
recognize
set,
the need for cultural
investing in
transformation?
people managers that have the biggest
Let's
impact in the
start with
culture,
that. So,
is
Joanne,
very
what did you
important,
say about
and
this?
making sure that they have the right
As an
skill set,
HR,
because it's part of their job. They're
yeah.
managing
What
a
extent do
function,
companies around
but
the world
through
recognize the
people.
import- I mean, you
So
can
it's
speak
very
from a
important.
Canadian
So I want to start with the
employer
questions,
perspective,
answering
and
the
I can
questions.
bring
Can we
maybe some
bring?
international
Yes, thank you
perspective.
very much. Simon Tompkins, to
We
what
cannot hear
extent do
you,
companies
Joanne. I don't
around the
know what
world
happened. Yeah.
recognize the need
Sorry,
for
famous, you're
cultural
on mute.
transformation?
I can
Um,
speak to
let's
what my
start
peers
with
in
that.
HR in
So,
Canada are,
Joanne,
we're
what
all
would you
talking
say
about this,
about this?
Okay.
the Great Resignation,
Like as an
you
HR,
know, how our different unique cultures are impacting it and
yeah.
how we need
To
to
what extent
transform
do
it.
companies
You
around the
know,
world
we're surveying
recognize the
our
need for? I mean,
employees,
you can speak
we're
from a
responding
Canadian,
as best as we can
employer
to
perspective, and
their
I can
needs
bring
and
maybe an
demands and
international perspective.
offering them
We
different
cannot hear you, Joanne. I don't know
packages
what happened. Yeah.
and
Sorry, famous, you're on
other
mute.
training programs to keep them
I can
working
speak
more.
to
It needs to be
what my peers in
individualized,
HR in
recognizing
Canada
individuals,
are,
different
we're
learning
all talking
styles,
about
different
this,
needs.
the Great
They're
Resignation,
working
and
parents, they're going to have different
how
needs than,
our
single
different
person in
unique
their
cultures
20s.
are impacting
So
it, and how we need to transform
there's
it.
a huge need
We're
there.
surveying our employees,
Especially
we're
if you think
responding
about,
as
like,
fast as we
Canada is
can
very diverse, the
to
workforce is
their
very
needs and
diverse,
demands, and
US is very diverse, the
offering them
workforce is very diverse. That speaks to
different
the diversity piece.
packages. A
Not,
cookie cutter
just,
training program isn't
you
going to
bring
work
that
anymore.
diverse
It needs to be
workforce, the diverse
individualized,
individuals to the workforce,
recognizing
and then you
individuals, different
expect
learning
them
styles, different
to
needs.
really be happy
If they're working
with
parents, they're going to
what
have
has
different needs than,
existed for
a
hundreds of
single person
years,
in their
you
20s.
know,
Right.
So
and
being,
force them
there's a
to
huge
forget
need
about their
there.
culture,
Hmm.
like the
Especially if you think
elements
about,
that
like,
make them
Canada is very
eligible
diverse,
for
the
the job.
workforce is very diverse,
It is not
US is very
welcome
diverse,
anymore
the
in the
workforce is
workplace.
very diverse.
So
That
that
speaks
that
to
is
the
that
diversity
should
piece.
change for sure.
Like,
That
not
should change for sure.
just,
So maybe I can
you
speak,
bring that
and then I
diverse
will invite
workforce, the
Joelle and
diverse
Ed maybe.
individuals to
So
the
a few
workforce,
things.
and
So
then you
the
expect them to
organizational
really
world
be
has
happy
changed, and
with
there is more
what
hybrid
has
work, there is
existed
more
for
remote
hundreds of
work,
years,
and
Right.
more
and
than
then
ever. And
force
with
them
that,
to
of course,
forget
that
about their
forces us,
culture, like the
before we had
elements
the
that
need
make
for
them
cultural
eligible for the
transformation
job
that considers
is
our
not welcome
well-being
anymore in
more
the
than ever,
workplace.
as
So
humans, because
that
we
that is
are in the center
that
of the
should
culture.
change for
But
sure.
with the
That should
remote
change
work,
for sure. So
with
maybe I can
pandemic,
speak,
and with the
and then
hybrid
I will
work,
invite
we need
Joel
even
and Ed maybe. So a few
more
things. So the
transformation. And
organizational world
if
has changed, and
people are,
there is more
Simon, if
hybrid work,
people
there is
are
more remote
resigning,
work, um,
if people
more than ever.
stay
And with
shorter,
that, of course, that
if
forces us,
productivity is low,
before we had the need for
if
cultural
people work
transformation
long
that
hours,
considers our
but productivity
well-being
numbers
more
are not
than ever,
increasing.
as humans,
Those
because
are the
we are in
internal
the center of the
factors
culture.
that
But with the
are
remote
signs
work,
for me,
with
for the need
pandemic,
for
and with
cultural
the hybrid
transformation.
work, we
Also,
need even
people are not happy in
more
organizations.
transformation.
If you see
And
that
if
the same
people
old
are,
people
Simon, if
are
people are
managing the company
resigning,
for
if
50
people
years, I'm
stay
exaggerating, of course,
shorter,
but the younger
if
generations
productivity is
are not
low,
finding opportunities to
if people
grow, to
work
learn,
long
that is also
hours,
a sign,
but productivity and numbers
that
are not
there needs to
increasing,
be
those are the internal
more
factors that
space for
are
those
signs for
generations
me,
as well.
for
Of
a
course, we
need
are
for
talking about
cultural
large
transformation.
organizations,
Also, if
but
people are not
in
happy
small
in the
organizations,
organization, if you
culture is
see that,
very lean,
the
but
same
still
old
opportunities
people
can be
are
created.
managing the company
No.
for
And
50 years, I'm exaggerating, of course, but the younger
so you have
generations
to
are not finding
understand that profit,
opportunities to grow, to learn.
productivity,
That is also a
and
sign,
people
that
are in
there
the
needs
same
to be
place. So you have to really
more
give the same
space
way to
for
each
those
of them. So
generations
what
as
can
well.
be
Of
done to
course, we are talking
influence
about large
companies to invest in the
organizations, but
well-being of their
in
people?
small organizations,
Um,
culture is very lean, but
I
still
think we are talking
opportunities
about
can be created.
convincing maybe management
No, and
here,
Yeah.
influencing them. And what would
so you have
convince
to
managers, what would
understand
influence
that
You
profit,
know
management
what?
to invest?
One,
productivity,
one of the primary
and
tools in executive
people
development is a
are in the
360,
same
getting
place. So you
feedback
have
from
to really give the
multiple
same
perspectives and
way
people from
to
who know
each
you.
of them.
And
So
sometimes
what can
the
be done to
feedback a person
influence
receives is
companies
pretty
to invest
shocking
in
because
the
it's such a
well-being of their
conflict with
people?
their own personal
Um,
perspective and how they see themselves.
feel
I
like what
mean,
we're seeing here
I think
is
we're
almost
talking
like
about
a
convincing
360
maybe
for
management
corporations
here,
of feedback they've
Yeah.
not
influencing them.
sought before,
And
being
what
considered
would
valuable for, and
convince
now it's like
managers?
smacking
What would
people in the
influence
face of
Yeah.
we have some
You know what?
management
questions
to
and
invest?
One of the
issues that
primary
we have
tools in
not
executive
addressed
development is a
for
360
decades.
review, getting
And
feedback from multiple perspectives
there
of
are,
people
I think the
who know you.
statistics I saw
And
this morning
sometimes
here
the
in the US,
feedback a
there's
person
twice as
receives is
many
pretty shocking because it's
vacant
such a
jobs
conflict with
as there are
their own
unemployed
personal
people.
perspective
So
of how
even
they
if
see
everybody who
themselves.
wanted a job
I
got
feel
a
like
job,
what we're
we still
seeing
need
here
people.
is almost like
And I think
a
so that
360
I think
for corporations
looking
of
to interview
feedback
more
they've
people, we
not
just need
sought before,
enough people.
didn't
And
consider
so
valuable
it's
for,
very
and
much
now
a
it's like
competitive
smacking people in the face of
advantage to
we have some massive
to be people
issues
first
that
in
we
your
have
practices.
not
You will
addressed
get the
for
best people, you'll
decades.
get enough
And,
people, and maybe as an
you know,
industry,
there
you're
are, I think
suffering,
the
but your
statistics I
specific
saw this morning,
situations
there's
will be
here in
doing
the
fine.
US,
And
there
so
are
I think
twice as many
there's definitely
vacant
a
jobs as
capitalistic
there are unemployed
motive
people.
here
So even if
for
everybody
becoming
who wanted a
best in
job got a
class
job, there'd
in your
still be
people
a hole.
practices.
And
I
so
also
there's,
think there's an
I
opportunity to
think
look at the data.
looking, so
The
we don't
cost
need
of
all the people,
turnover
we just need
is
our enough
incredible.
people.
The
And
cost
so
of
it's very much a
absenteeism. We
competitive
have people that
advantage
are showing up for work
uh,
and not
to
working
be
as
people
effectively
first
as
in your
they could
practices.
be.
You
Those
will
are
get the
all
best people.
costs
You'll get enough people.
that, if they're
And
addressed,
maybe as an
you can
industry,
take
you're
that
suffering, but your
spend
specific
and put it
situation,
into
you'll be doing
well-being.
fine. And so I think there's
I
definitely
had a
a
client,
capitalistic
just a client,
motive
you know,
here
follow up with what
for
you said,
becoming
Joan.
best in class
She
in your
has
people
a team
practices.
of 6 people.
I also think there's an
And
opportunity to
this
look at
is
the
a
data.
Canadian
The
organization.
cost of
3 of
turnover
them
is
are
incredible.
usually
Cost of
absent because of
absenteeism,
some
preentees,
stress
people that
or
are
like,
showing up for
some
work
mental,
and not working
challenges,
as effectively
etc.
as they
And
could be.
she really
You know,
works
those are all
overload and
costs
she works like late
that if they're
at night
addressed,
because
you
of
know,
the
you could
lack
take
of
that
the team
spend
members.
and put it into
And
well-being.
and that creates
I
a lot of
have a
sense of
client, executive
overwhelm and
client, to just
burnout
follow up
and
with what you said,
so
Joanne.
there are two
She has a
aspects of
team
this
of
like
6 people.
dilemma. Employees
This is a Canadian organization.
mental
3 of
health
them
and then
are
that ends up
usually
more
absent
stress
because of
for the
some like
executive as well.
stress or like some mental challenges,
So thank you
etc. And
and
she really works
delivering the
overload, and
other
she
another
works like
question
late
what do you think
at
are the
night
hardest
because of
challenges
the
of
lack of
employees that
the
makes them
team
quit?
members.
Joelle, I
and
think this
um,
is a
and
question
that
for you.
creates a lot of sense of overwhelm and
Yeah, I
burnout.
think
And so there are
we
two
talked about this,
aspects
but
of
the
this, like
difficulty of
dilemma:
creating a solid
employees
bond
and
with your manager.
mental health,
And
and
if that
then
bond
that
wasn't solid
ends up more
pre-pandemic, pandemic
stress for
definitely
the
amplified the
executive as
fact
well.
that there's a disconnect with your manager or there's
So
a
thank you.
disconnect
And
with your team.
can we bring
And
the
I think
other
it
another
all comes
question? Yeah,
back
what
down
do you
to
think are the
having
highest challenges of
middle
employees that
managers who
makes them
are good
quit?
at coaching, good at
Joel, I think
mentoring, good
this
at
is
creating a
a
path
question for
for
you.
their employees and good at creating cohesion within their team. Yeah, I think we've talked about this, but the difficulty of creating a solid bond with your manager. And if that bond wasn't solid pre-pandemic, pandemic definitely has amplified the fact that there's a disconnect with your manager, there's a disconnect with your team, and I think it all comes back down to having middle managers who are good at coaching, good at mentoring, good at creating a path for their employees, and good at creating cohesion within their team. So yeah, I see
That's
within the job
amazing.
seekers,
That's a
people
perspective
are not
that
really
will
optimizing for
bring
salary right now. They're
cultural
really
shift
optimizing for
eventually.
how do I feel
I believe
about
in that, yeah.
the
Because that's the
hiring
reason
manager?
why
How
I
do I feel
resigned
about the
many
team that
years
I
ago.
met? How do
Didn't
I feel
feel
about the
like,
onboarding
my
process? And
values
even the
are
overall
had a
experience of
place
just
in the corporate
going
world
through
anymore.
interviews can really tint
Thank you.
their feeling of
And
the company.
so what kind
So
of a
yeah,
culture
employees
do
are
you
really
think
buying
that
into
access? You
community and
answered that as well.
experiences
Community, I like
much
that.
more than
Sense of connection,
transactional
I like
salary
that.
right now, for sure.
And you
That's
said one
that's
more thing,
that's
Joelle.
amazing. That's a perspective
I mean,
that
yes,
will
I've
bring
said a bunch of things,
cultural
but
shift eventually.
what I think would
I
really
believe in that.
be
Yeah.
like the
Because
focal
that's
point
the reason why I
of
resigned many
culture
years
is
ago. I didn't
if
feel
there's
like,
a
my
strong
values
sense
are
of the manager
had
with
a
like
place in the
high
corporate
level
world
of
anymore.
what the culture is,
Thank you. And so, what kind of a culture do you think would assist? You answered that as well. Community, I like that. Sense of connection, I like that. And you said one more thing, Joelle.
I mean, yeah, I've said a bunch of things, but what I think would really be like the focal point of culture is if there's a strong sense at the managerial, like high level of what the culture is, how does it boil down for a middle manager? How does that middle
Does the
manager
middle management
can
have an
really
understanding and
exemplify the
awareness
and
that
going back to
their
what you were
role is
saying,
crucial
if your middle
in
manager
the
is overworked,
organization
then
and
chances are
culture?
that their team is overworked. So how can
I
middle management be an
yes, yes and
example
no.
of
Well,
values
probably
in the
yes. I'm going
company
to say
culture,
yes.
and how can
Do they
they
have
insight that
the
into
support
their team? I think would
Yeah.
be
to
one
do
way I would
that
look at it.
well?
Do,
Or are they
a
just
simple
put in roles? I think
question
Jen spoke to
to
this
you,
earlier. Are
Joanne.
they just
Do
promoted
they
into
have
roles
the
and
awareness
you know
about this?
giving them
Does the middle
to just get
management
up and running? You know, I'm
have
often
an
told, you know, I just
understanding
need
and
someone to hit the
awareness
ground
that
running
their role
when
is
I'm hiring.
crucial
Well,
to the
that's tough.
organization
It's
and
when you're
culture?
promoting within, we
I
have to consider that as well. They have
yes,
to,
yes and
those
no.
new people managers need
Well, probably
developing
yes. I'm
and
going to say
coaching and
yes.
mentoring,
Do they
and
have
then they can take
the
those
support
that learned
to
skill
do that well?
in managing their own
Or are they
employees.
just put in roles? I
So
think
we
Ed
need
spoke
to
to this
support
earlier. Are
them
they
as
just promoted into
employers.
roles
Yeah,
and
and I think Joelle spoke to this. You know,
given
those
them
middle managers are often the most
just get up
overworked.
and running? I'm often
And as soon
told,
as they
I
lose
just
one
need
person on
someone
their
to
team,
hit
that
the ground
work
running
gets redistributed
when I'm
to the
hiring.
team
Well,
or on their plate.
that's tough.
And
It's and when you're
that's
promoting within,
that's what we're experiencing
we
right
have to
now.
consider that as well. They have to;
And
those new people
speaking to
managers
that,
need developing
another
and coaching and mentoring, and then they can
client of
take
mine,
those
corporate
that's
client,
learned skill
she has
in
people
managing their own employees.
So
constant
we need to
onboarding, she
support
says,
them
like
as
the number
employers.
of
Yeah,
like
and I think
turnover
Joelle
and
spoke to this.
it's
Those middle
really like
managers are often the
tiring, lack
most
of
overworked.
productivity, and
And as soon as
she's
they lose one person
started
on their
to
team, that work
dream
gets
about her
redistributed to the team
retirement,
or on their plate.
So I'm trying to
Um,
bring her
and
back to like
that's what we're
productivity
experiencing
and
right now.
culture,
Mm.
etc. But
And
that's her daily
speaking to that,
reality. She's just
another
constantly onboarding.
client of
And
mine,
then she
a
starts to
corporate
question like what
client,
I'm doing, like what
she
is
has
why I was
people
hired. Was
and
I hired for this? And yeah,
constant
yeah.
onboarding, she says, like
Just another
because
data
of
point. My wife is an HR.
turnover and
She's in
employ.
talent
It's really
acquisition.
like tiring, lack
You
of
know, many dinner time
productivity, and
conversations around a hiring manager that
she
is just
started
desperate to
to
get somebody in as
dream
soon
about
as
her
possible.
retirement.
Gotta have them,
So
you
I'm
know,
trying to
unrealistic
bring her back
expectations. And
to
then
like
when candidates emerge,
productivity and
go to their
culture,
calendar to try
etc.
to book some
But
interviews, and
that's
there's
her
no
daily
time.
reality. She
They're
says
too busy
constant
to interview
onboarding.
the
you
people
know
they need
and
that
then
are going to make a
she
difference.
starts
So
to
I mean, it's a
question like
catch
what I'm
22,
doing,
and
like what is why
I'm
I
all
was
about the
hired.
empathy
Was
for
I
those
hired
people
for
stuck
this?
in the middle.
Yeah,
Ed, yeah,
yeah,
you
Yeah.
were
yeah.
saying.
Well, just another
And
data point. My
it's
wife
important to
is in
remind
HR.
those
She's in
managers that
talent
you have to help
acquisition, and
yourself first before you can help others.
many dinner
Just
time
like when you're,
conversations
in an
around a
airplane,
hiring
you
manager
fill your
that
own
is just
oxygen
desperate
mask
to
up
get
first
somebody as soon as possible.
before you can help
Gotta have them,
others.
gotta have them.
Yeah.
Unrealistic expectations,
That's
and
a
then
very
when
important
candidates
point.
emerge,
Yeah.
go to their
And
calendar to try to book some
yes,
interviews, and there's no
Kim
time.
is asking how
They're
can
too
the
busy
teams that
to
spend
interview the people they
multi-generations
need that
millennials
are going to
boomers.
make a
We
difference. So I
received
mean,
a
it's a
lot of
catch 22,
questions
and
about this,
I'm all about the
similar
empathy
questions
for
to
those
this,
people stuck in the middle.
questions to this.
Yeah, yeah,
So millennials,
amazing.
boomers,
It's important to remind
Joelle,
those managers that
we
you
have
have to
three
help yourself
generations
first before
here,
you can help
and I'm
others.
sure
Just like
we
when you're
have
in an airplane,
different
you need to put
Yep.
your
generations
own
in our
oxygen mask on
audience, among
first
our audience too.
before you
So
can help others.
as a
Yeah.
previous career
That's a
services
very
manager, and
important
now
point.
what
Yeah. And
career coach,
yes,
helping
Kim is asking how to
millennials
engage
and
teams
tech
that
people.
span multi
What is your
generations,
perspective
millennials,
on that?
boomers. We received a lot of questions about
Yeah,
this,
especially in tech,
similar
I feel like
questions
it's
to this.
definitely
So,
I don't
millennials,
have
boomers,
an actual
Joel,
answer. I think it's very
we have
broad,
three generations
but I
here,
think you
and
touched
I'm sure
on
we have
communicating
different
and
generations
listening
in
with
our
curiosity
audience, among
would
our
be like
audience
the
too.
main
So,
thing,
as a
because each generation
previous
has
career
something very
services
important to
manager, and
bring
now work
to the table,
career
and
coach,
listening to everyone
helping
will make sure that your coach is
millennials and tech
also
people what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, especially in tech, I feel like it's definitely. I don't have like an actual answer. I think it varies a lot, but I think we touched on communicating and listening with curiosity would be like the main thing, because each generation has something very important to bring to the table, and listening to everyone will make sure that your culture is also able to encompass everyone's needs. But I think from what I've seen,
So we have a new question, but
from what
before
I've
coming
seen,
to that, I wanna
every
say
new generation is pushing
the
towards
other
goals
question,
that kind
please,
of are
please go
beneficial
ahead.
for all of the
So
generations.
I
So I
want to
would,
bring
of course, I'm
a
talking from a
perspective
millennial standpoint, but
from
I
my
feel like
psychology background.
the
So
values that we're
why do
pushing
we engage?
are also
What makes
beneficial
us want to
for
engage?
boomers and for Gen X and
Is a
for
question
eventually
that
Gen Z
maybe,
coming in.
yeah. So what makes us
So I
want to
think
engage
open-mindedness,
is really
curiosity, and
when we're
consulting on
curious
everyone
about
is
others,
very important.
and we
Thank
want
you,
to
Joel.
express ourselves as
And I
ourselves. That's our
so we have a new
psychological
question,
need.
but before coming to
And
that, I want to say, can
if
we
we
bring the other question, please? Kim's
have
question, yeah.
like as
So
an
I want
employee,
to
as a
bring
manager,
a perspective
and as the
from my
culture
psychology
creates
background.
those
So
opportunities for
why do
us
we
to
engage,
express
and what
ourselves,
makes us want
to
to
express our
engage?
differences, to
Is
express
a
our
question that maybe
creativity,
we can
our
ask. So,
opinions,
what makes us
then
want to
we will feel
engage
like, oh,
is
I'm
really
not
when we're
judged.
curious about others,
This is a
and we
safe
want
place
to
to
express
speak up.
ourselves as
This is a safe
ourselves. That's
place
our
to share.
psychological need.
And I
And
then want to engage, and I feel,
if
and if I'm
we
appreciated, if
have
my
like
work is
as an
appreciated,
employee, as
then
a
I want to engage
manager,
even further.
and
If
as
I
the
receive
culture
a
creates those
constructive feedback
opportunities for us
that
to
allows
express
me
ourselves,
to improve
to
myself,
express our
to
differences,
develop
to express
myself,
our
then I
creativity,
want to
our
engage.
opinions,
Same with
then
everybody at
we will
every
feel like,
level, from
oh, I'm
C-level
not judged.
to the individual
This is a
contributor's
safe
level.
place to
So
speak up. This
if
is a safe place
I
to
receive
share.
validation and
And
acknowledgement,
I then
then I
want to
want to
engage, and I
engage.
feel, and if
All of
I'm
those things,
appreciated,
like, speaks to
if
our
my
psychological
work is
needs.
appreciated,
At the
then I
end of
want to
the day,
engage even
everything is
further.
about human
If I
psychology.
receive a constructive
What makes us
feedback
want to engage
that
is our
allows
psychological
me
needs and wants.
to improve myself,
We were
to
saying,
develop myself, then I
Yeah,
want to engage.
um,
Same with everybody at
the
every level,
language of
from C level
generational cohorts
to
is
the
really
individual
originally
contributors
intended to
level.
help us understand that the
So
circumstances
if
in which
I
we
receive
were a child and
validation and
young adult shape us
acknowledgement,
for
then
life.
I want to
And because of
engage.
the rate of
All
change
of
in our
those things,
culture,
like, speaks
that's
to
why we
our
see
psychological
such
needs.
dramatic differences.
At the
But
end of the day,
what I see
everything is about
and
human
fear is
psychology.
particularly related to this question is
What
the
makes us want to
weaponization
engage
of
is our
generational
psychological
cohorts like
needs and wants.
millennial for you,
Ed,
just
you
a
were
boomer.
saying,
And we use this language
Yeah.
pejoratively, and the stereotypes
The
have far
language
more
of
weight than the reality.
generational cohorts
And
really
to take a
originally
generational
intended to
cohort
help
of
us
say
understand
70
that the
million people, I think just
circumstances
the round
in which
numbers are
we
never
were a
millennials.
child and young
And
adult shape
any
us
generation,
for
70
life.
million people
And
will not
because
be
of the
true
rate of
across the
change in
board.
our culture,
And so
that's
rather
why we
than
see
focus on
such
these
dramatic differences. But
generational
what I
stereotypes,
see and
I
fear
totally
is
agree with
particularly
Joelle
related to
that
this question is
whatever the push
the
is really what's good
weaponization
for
of
everybody.
generational
If we
cohorts,
become the
like, well,
best
there's
in
a
practice
millennial for you,
company, just
he's
listen
just a
to your
boomer.
younger
And we
employees.
use this
We're
language
much more
pejoratively,
astute to
and
come into the
the
workforce
stereotypes
looking
have
for things
far
that
more
maybe
weight
my
than the
middle
reality.
generations is I'm just glad I have
And
a job.
to take
I'm
a
quite sure it'll
generational
all work
cohort of,
out.
say,
And then we
70
get in,
million
I
people,
realize,
I
holy
think is
cow,
the
this is a
round
mess.
numbers I remember
I
for
think
millennials.
our younger
And any
generations are far
generation, 70
more
million people will not be true across the
likely to
board.
spot
And so rather than
cultural,
focus on these generational
dysfunction and
stereotypes,
say no thanks.
I totally agree with Joelle that whatever the push is really what's good for
I
everybody.
totally
You want to
agree
become a best in
with what you
practice company, just
shared.
listen to your
And can
younger
we
employees who are much
think
more astute. They come into the workforce
the
looking for
Lord.
things that maybe
And
my
I
middle
need to add
generation
one
is like, I'm
because
just glad to
I
have a
thought
job.
I was
I'm sure it'll all work out. And then you get in and you
realize,
realize, holy cow, this thing's a
yeah,
mess.
both of
I
the
think
techniques
our
were
younger
part of them
generations are
and
way
even
more
don't get part of my
likely
time.
to spot cultural,
Thank you, Lloyd.
dysfunction
Micromanagement,
and say no thanks.
So it takes us
Thank
to
you. Thank you,
indeed
Ed.
situational
I
leadership.
totally agree
You know,
with what you
so
all shared. And
when do
can
you
we
micromanage? You know,
bring
so micromanagement is
the,
for
yes,
those
Lloyd.
people. It's
In
not
an
a bad
agency,
thing
as
all
one
the
of the
time,
reasons
but
I
if a
felt I
person is
was
new to the job
micromanaged, I eventually resigned
and
because of
in the
this.
just beginning of
Yeah,
the learning
bosses
curve,
expect you to work as
you
hard
you
as them, and even if you don't
you stay
get paid
close to
as
the
much as them.
person. You give like
Um, Thank you, Lloyd.
clear directions about the
Micromanagement.
job. Then that might call, I
So
suppose,
it takes us
micromanagement. But
to indeed
micromanaging people that
situational
already have
leadership.
experience
You
and
know,
expertise
so
ends up in
when do you micromanage?
demotivation
So
and lack of
micromanagement
motivation.
is
Thank you,
for
Lloyd,
those
for that
people. It's
perspective.
not a bad
Joanne,
thing all the time,
do you
but if
have
a person
anything to
is
say
new to
about
the
that?
job
As we
and in the just beginning of
Micromanaging
the
might
learning curve,
be
you
developed due
you
to
stay close to the person,
unmet
you give like
expectations. Perhaps the
um,
expectations weren't
clear
clear from the
directions
beginning.
about the job,
But yeah,
then
I hear
that
that all the
might
time
call, I
in
suppose,
interviews. People do
micromanagement.
not
But
want to be micromanaged.
micromanaging
I don't
people
want
that
to be
already have
micromanaged,
experience and
but I also
expertise
want to know
ends up in
what the expectations are
demotivation
so I
and
can
lack of
deliver.
motivation. Thank you,
I think
Lloyd,
that takes
for
us
that
to the
perspective.
process
Joanne,
piece also.
do you have
Like
anything to
when
say
you
about
are
that?
micromanaged, you
As
feel
we
like the
Micromanaging might
manager, the direct report does not
be
trust you.
developed due to
And everybody wants to be
unmet
trusted and everybody
expectations.
wants to be
Perhaps
able
the
to trust,
expectations
you
weren't
know.
clear from the
So
beginning.
thank you, Lloyd, for
But
bringing up
yeah, I
that
hear that all the
perspective.
time in interviews. People do not want to be
Eddie,
micromanaged.
what advice do
I
you
don't
have for
like to be
companies
micromanaged,
struggling to create
but I
one
also
cohesive
want to
culture
know
as a result of
what
growth through
the
M&A?
expectations are
M&A
so
is
I can
merge and
deliver.
acquisition for those of
Mhm.
you
I
who
think
might
that
not be
takes us to the
familiar with the
trust
term,
piece
and a
also.
geographically
Like when
dispersed
you are
employee population.
micromanaged,
This
you
is a
feel
very
like
sophisticated
the
question. I
manager,
just
your
want to
direct report, does
throw
not
the
trust you.
question to, like,
And everybody wants to
the
be
panel,
trusted and
and
everybody wants to be able
whomever
to
would like to
trust.
Mhm.
say
So thank
something
you,
about
Lloyd,
this.
for
I
bringing
have
up
case
that
studies I can
perspective.
share, but I would like to hear from
Eddie,
the
what
panelists.
advice do you have for
Thinking about some work I
companies
did some
struggling to
years ago
create
in the
one
northeastern United
cohesive
States
culture
with
as a
an
result of
engineering
growth
firm
through
that had
M&A?
grown
M&A is
significantly. I
merge and
think there
acquisition
were
for those of you who
eight
might not be
companies
familiar
that
with the
had
term,
once all been
and a geographically
independent that were now
dispersed
under one
employee
umbrella, one
population.
corporate
This
umbrella.
is a
And part
very
of it they would buy
sophisticated
a group that
question. I
had a
just want to
specialty in a
throw the
aspect
question
of
to
engineering that they didn't have.
the panel and
And these companies have
whomever
radically
would like
different
to say
cultural
something about this. I have
expectations
case studies
within
I
the
can
office.
share,
And
but I would like to hear from
it's
our
not an easy
panelists.
thing
I'm
to
thinking
do.
about
It's
some
like
work I did
a
some
blended
years ago in the
family.
northeastern
You
United
come with
States
different
with an
expectations,
engineering
different
firm that had
opinions on
grown
what's right, what's wrong,
significantly. I
the way
think
you do
there
things
were
around here.
eight
What
companies
it's
that
not
had
easy or
once all
quick,
been
but it does
independent that
involve
were now under one
lots and
umbrella,
lots
one
of
corporate umbrella.
interaction
And
with
part of it,
people
they would
trying
buy
to,
a
first
group
of all,
that
to
had a
pinpoint the
specialty in a
differences
aspect
and
of
then trying to find the
engineering that
common
they didn't
ground,
have.
typically around
These
values,
companies had
around
radically different
uh, uh,
cultural
purpose.
expectations
And I'm not talking
within the
about like
office.
what
And
Pat Lencioni calls table
it is
stakes, like
not
the
an easy
generic
thing to
values that
do.
every
It's like
company has.
a
But those
blended
things that
family.
really
You come
have
with
made you
different expectations,
and
different
made you
opinions on
successful.
what's right and what's
And if we
wrong,
filter
the
out
way we
all
do
of
things
the
around here. What It's not easy or
superfluous
quick, but it does
values,
involve
you find that there
lots and
probably
lots
are
of
a handful of things
interaction
in
with
common,
people
and
trying
that's
to,
where then you have to
first of
kind
all,
of
just
hone
pinpoint the
in on it. How
differences
do we
and then
emphasize
trying to
these things
find the
we share
common
in
ground,
common?
typically around
That's a
values,
very
around
general answer to a very
uh,
complicated question.
Yeah, it's a very sophisticated
purpose.
and complicated
And I'm not
question.
talking
I
about
want
like
to
what
say
Pat
one
Lencioni
thing
calls table
that
stakes,
really
like the
is
generic
crucial
values that
and
every company
vital
has, but those
in
things that
any
really
change
have
management
made you
process,
distinct and
and
made you
especially in the M&A
successful.
process.
And if we
You
filter out
need
all the
to
sort of the
create a systemic approach and strategic approach
superfluous
that includes
values,
people and
you
people
find that there
management.
probably
You
are
know,
a handful of things in common, and
those
that's where then you have to kind of hone in
times
on it. How do
where
we
change is
emphasize these things we share in
a
common?
reality.
That's a
So
very
I
general
suggest
answer
that
to a very complicated question.
It's a very
anytime it happens,
sophisticated and complicated
really
question, but
think
I want to
as
say
one
one
big
thing that
piece,
really
like
is
system,
crucial and vital in
and
any change
what is
management
it
process,
that
and especially in the M&A
is
process.
useful, like as
You
a
need
culture, like
to
what
create
are the
a
components
systemic
of the
approach and
culture
strategic
that will
approach
have
that includes
and ease the
people and people
transition.
management.
that
in
includes
those
criteria for like
times where change is
leading and
a
managing
reality. So I
geographically
suggest
dispersed
that,
employees, leading and management with
anytime it
fear,
happens, really see it as
and
one
from of
big
the
piece,
uncertainty,
like system,
and how are
and
you going to motivate
what is it
people when they
that,
are afraid of their future?
is
You know,
useful, like as a culture, like,
feel
what are the components of the
you
culture
know,
that will
emotions
help
there,
and
and
ease the
also
transition. That
in my
includes
experience, I don't know, but
criteria
usually
for, like,
managers find it easier to manage the business
leading and
function
managing
than the
geographically
people factor.
disturbed employees,
So how
leading and management
invest
the
in
fear
people, but see it as a big
from the of the
strategic and systemic
uncertainty,
project and create
and
components and
how are
tools
you going to
within
motivate
that project.
people when
One
they
thing
are afraid of their future?
that I
you know
feel like
there are two
that
conflicting,
sabotages
emotions
change
there. And also,
initiatives in companies is
in my experience, I don't know, but
the
usually managers find it
disconnected
easier
approach,
to manage the
the
business functions
compartment or
than the,
segregated,
people
or like
factor.
compartmentalized
So how
approach to
invest in your
change.
people, but see it as a big
It has to be systemic.
strategic and
It has
systemic
you have to
project, and
bring
create
you have to
components
create a
and tools
strategy like you
within that
create
project.
a strategy
One
for your
thing
business development or business
that I
functions.
feel like
This should have a
that sabotages
strategic approach.
change
So that's why I
initiatives in
remember the two
companies is
case studies. One
the
was I'm not
disconnected
going to name
approach,
the clients
like
because they're
compartment or
Fortune
segregated, or
500
like
companies.
compartmentalized
They're well known.
approach
So one
to
company in the
change.
FMCG industry,
It has to be
confectionery
systemic.
industry, was
It has you
purchased by
have to
another
bring
one,
you have to create a
one
strategy,
American,
like
one
you create
European.
a strategy for your
So the
business
American
development or
company
business
had its
functions.
own culture,
This
and
should
Europeans
have a
came in and
um,
purchased
strategic
in one
approach.
end
So
market.
that's why
There was a cultural clash
I
and a lot of
remember just two
fear,
case studies.
and they were like
One
trying to
was,
employees
I'm not
were
going to
trying to
name the
steer
clients
and
because they're
navigate, and but
Fortune
once
500
the
companies.
support arrived,
They're well known. So
and
one
a
company in
systemic
the
strategic
FMCG
support arrived,
industry,
and the
confectionery
managers
industry,
really
was
felt
purchased
relieved
by
and
another
felt
one,
supported, and they
one
knew what to
American,
do.
one European.
So that's
So
very
the American
important.
company had
um,
its own culture,
you
and then
might
when
not be able
Europeans
to
came
create
in and
one
purchased
cohesive culture. I also want
in one
to
end
speak to
market,
that,
there
but you
was a
might
cultural clash and a lot
be
of
able to
fear,
create
and they were like
a
trying
safe
to employees
transition
were trying to
to
steer
that
and
in the
navigate,
short
and
run, and it
but
takes about a year
once the
or two
support
to
arrived,
create such a
a
transformation, by the way,
systemic
cultural
strategic support
transformation,
arrived,
if you
and the
approach
managers
it from a
really felt
systemic
relieved
perspective.
and felt supported, and they knew
That's
what to do.
what I would like to share.
So that's
And in
very
another
important.
case
um,
study, one pharma
you
company,
might not
both
be able to create one cohesive
American,
culture. I also
was
want to
purchased,
speak to that,
joined, purchased
but
by
you
another
might
pharma company.
be able to
And
create
when we worked with them,
a safe
um,
transition
the cultures
to that
clash, like
in the short run.
the
And it takes
systems for
about
everything clash,
a year or
and
two
it wasn't
to create such a
managed from like
transformation, by
top
the way,
down,
cultural
and everybody
transformation,
was doing
if
their
you
best in
approach it
their
from a systemic
departments and
perspective.
divisions, and each
That's what
imposed
I
their
would
own
like to
style, old
share. And
like
in another
old company
case
style
study,
versus
one
new
pharma
company
company,
style,
both
and then they weren't able to speak the
American,
same language.
was
You have to
purchased, a
facilitate
giant
that.
purchased by another pharma
You
company.
have to help them
And when
to
we worked with
co-create
them,
a common
um,
language
the
to
cultures clashed,
understand
like,
each other.
the
And you need
systems,
really external
everything
help in
clashed.
those,
And it wasn't
situations.
managed
Really
from,
need
like,
to be
top
supported
down,
in those
and everybody
situations.
was doing their best
And
in
then
their
when secret
departments
coaching
and
really helps.
divisions, and each imposed their own styles,
um,
like
Lloyd,
old company
thank you. I'm
style
really enjoying.
versus new company
Thank you, Lloyd.
style,
We
and
will
then they weren't
continue,
able to speak the
and
same
thank you for
language.
being here,
You
Lloyd.
have to
So,
facilitate that.
can we bring a
You
slide
have to
before
help
we move?
them
Yeah,
to
I want to
create a
share,
common
since this
language
topic is really related to
to
what
understand
as
each other,
flow coaching
and you need
institute
really
have been
external help
doing
in
and
those,
trying to achieve by
situations.
humanizing the
Really need to
workplaces
be supported
and
in those
helping managers
situations.
to
And then
learn
one secret,
and
coaching really helps.
incorporate and integrate the right skill set to
um,
increase their
Lloyd,
impact as
thank you. I'm
leaders.
really enjoying
So
this.
I would like
Thank you,
to
Lloyd. We will
share some of the
continue.
upcoming courses
And
that
thank you
we
for being
have.
here, Lloyd.
So this
So,
Monday we have
can we
a
bring a
coaching
slide before we move? Yeah.
program
I want to
called
share,
Core
since this
Foundations.
topic is really
Starting, it's a
related to
certification
what,
program
as Flow
fully
Coaching Institute,
certified
we
by
have
the
been doing and
ICF.
trying to
It's
achieve,
going to
like
be
humanizing the
only 3 weeks,
workplaces,
and the
helping
title
managers
that you will
to
earn
learn
at the end of the
and
program is
incorporate
Flow
and
Certified
integrate
Coach
the right
aligned with
skill set
ICF certification.
to
This
increase their
course has a
impact
specific
as
focus
leaders.
on
So I would like
helping you
to share
to
some of the upcoming
work with the
courses
whole
that we
person to
have.
understand the
So this
psychology of
Monday we have
coaching a
a
whole person,
coaching
whether it's an employee
program
or whether it's a
called
manager,
Core
doesn't matter.
Foundations.
People are people,
Starting, it's a
and this course
certification
really
program
understands
fully
what lies
certified by the
behind our
ICF.
motivation.
It's
Yeah.
going to be
And the
only
second
three
course
weeks, and
is one of my
the
favorites.
title that you will
We have been
earn
doing this
at the end of the
with
program
a
is
lot of
Flow
corporations
Certified
for
Coach,
more than
along
a
with
decade now.
ICF certification.
Our
This
Leader
course
as
has a
Coach
specific
program,
focus on
coaching skills
helping
and
you
strategies for today's
to
managers,
work
is
with the whole
available
person to
as an
understand the
open
psychology
course
of
right now
coaching
to
a
people
whole
who would
person, whether
like to
it's an
sign up
employee or
individually
whether it's a
or
manager,
as an
doesn't matter. People
organization.
are
And what
people,
we
and
teach
this
in this
course really
program is
understands what lies behind
the
our
skill sets
motivations,
and the strategies
And the
to
second course
incorporate
is one of my
coaching
favorites.
into your
We have
management,
been
people
doing this
management, into
with
project
a lot of
management, into
corporations
change
for
management,
more than a
into
decade now.
managing teams,
Our Leader as Coach
and
program,
also how to
Coaching Skills and
strategize
Strategies for Today's
those
Managers,
skills in the
is
workplace.
available
That is
as an
usually missing.
open
People think
course
that
right now
you just,
to people who would like
coach.
to sign
No,
up individually
coaching is,
or as an
if it is
organization.
used
And what
right,
we teach in
it
this
could
program
become a
is
strategic tool and
the
process.
skill
So that
set
is what
and the
we are going
strategies to
teach in
incorporate
the program and
coaching
demonstrate.
into your
And
management,
of course,
people management,
our
into your
signature
project
course,
management,
Business Coaching
into change
Certification Program,
management,
will start
into
in July
managing
for those
teams,
people who are
and
interested
also
in
how
learning
to
to coach in the
strategize
workplace
those
and
skills in
also
the
learning to
workplace.
coach
That is
managers
usually
and
missing. People
executives
think that
and
you
also
just,
entrepreneurs.
coach.
So
No,
for those of you who are
coaching
interested,
is,
please send us
if it
an
is used
email
right,
at
it could
info at
become a strategic tool
flowcoachinginstitute.com.
and process. So that is
And the
what we are going
information
to
is available on our
teach
website,
in the program and demonstrate. And also, of course,
www.flowcoachinginstitute.com.
our
We will
signature
be
course,
happy to
Business
schedule
Coaching
a call with
Certification
you to
Program,
discuss
will
this
start
program
in
and
July
what skill
for those
set that
people
it
who
gives
are
you
interested in learning to
further.
coach in the workplace
So
and also
we
learning to
have just
coach
a few
managers and
minutes
executives
left.
and
Can
also
we please bring
entrepreneurs.
one last
So,
question
for those of
and
you who
then
are
we will
interested,
close.
please send us an
And
email
here's some
at
examples
info at
where you missed and that
flowcoachinginstitute.com.
I think they work well. Yeah.
And the information is
Successful
available on our
interventions.
website,
I think you shared
www.flowcoachinginstitute.com.
maybe a few
We will be
already,
happy to schedule a
but
call with you to
do you
discuss these programs
have
and what
an
skill set
example
that
that
it
you can
gives you
remember, or do you?
further. So, we
Well, I
have
think
just a
I'm
few
thinking of a number of
minutes left.
successful
Can we please
engagements.
bring one last
It was
question
usually some
and then
combination
we
of
will close? Can you
consulting,
share some
training,
examples
and
where you
coaching
made
and hitting that
and
sweet spot in
that
because
I think they
there
work well?
there
Yeah,
are some sort of
successful
big picture
interventions.
things that need to be addressed.
I
There's
think
often some
we
trainings
shared
that people
maybe
need
a
to get.
few
For example,
already,
how does a manager use
but
coaching
do
techniques to
you
be a more effective manager?
have
Within that
an
one-on-one
example
coaching, that's where
that you
things
can
get
remember,
cemented. That's
or do
where
you?
this information ceases to become information
Well, I think
and becomes
I think of
knowledge,
a number
becomes
of
wisdom. And I think
successful
that
engagements.
when you leave out
It
any
was
one of
usually
those three
some
pieces, you probably
combination
get a
of
less than ideal outcome.
consulting, training, and
Thank
coaching,
you.
kind of hitting that sweet spot because
Joanne, anything
there
to
are
add?
some sort of
I would agree to
big
that.
picture things that need to
The
be addressed.
individualized
There's often some
coaching
training
sessions
that people
really
need to
can
get. For example, how
help
does a manager use
someone
coaching
move
techniques to be a more
um,
effective manager? Within that
quite
one-on-one
quickly
coaching, that's where things get
to where
cemented.
they
That's
want to
where
be,
this
where they or where
information
you want
ceases
to
to
be as
become
an employee.
information. It becomes
Um,
knowledge, it becomes
and
wisdom.
that
And
one-on-one
I
is
think
what
that
people are craving.
when you leave out any one of those three pieces, you
And
probably get a
you can
less
build
than
trust
ideal
with that person
outcome.
through those coaching sessions.
Mhm.
Thank you, Ed. Um,
Joelle?
Joanne, anything to add?
I would agree to that. The
Yeah, I mean,
individualized coaching sessions really can help
we've seen
someone
some
move
companies kind of
um,
change their ways
quite
in the way that
quickly
they interact with the
to where they want to
graduates that
be,
I work with,
or where you want them to be as an
and create like
employee. Um,
better experiences or
and
experiences
that
that
one-on-one
are
is
more
what people are
aligned
craving.
with their values, and that really made a huge
And
difference
you
in
can build trust
hiring
with that person through
and
those
in
coaching sessions.
my clients choosing them over, for example, another company. So I
Joelle?
think yeah, when your values yeah, I mean, from more of a recruitment side of things, have a huge impact on who we've you're seen into some companies kind of change their ways in the way that they interact
Thank you.
with
So
the
which
graduates
makes
that
me
I
think
work with,
about the big strategy,
and create
like
like
the
better
macro
experiences or
strategy of
experiences
the
that are
company,
more aligned with their
should
values, and
really
that
be
really made
reflected
a
in the
huge
people
difference in the
strategy of
hiring
the company,
and in
which starts with
my
recruitment
clients choosing them
and
over, for example,
training and
another
development,
company. So I think
coaching
yeah,
individually and as
when your
teams,
values translate
and
to even your
alignment
recruitment
with
experience,
business
that
objectives also,
really
and
has a
including
huge impact
the
on who
people
you're
in
bringing
those
into your
decisions.
team and
Doesn't
will they
matter
stay with you
if
in
the
the future.
person is an
Mm,
individual contributor or
thank you.
a
So, which
people
makes me
manager,
think about
they
the
can
big
still contribute
strategy,
to the
like
overall
the
vision and
macro
strategy of the
strategy of the
company, and
company,
also acknowledging that,
should really be
validating that
reflected in the people
contribution also
strategy of
is
the company,
a
which starts with
culture
recruitment
that might
and training
increase
and development,
engagement,
coaching
and
individually and
bring
as
maybe more
teams,
cohesion,
and alignment with
to
business objectives
as a
also, and
sense,
including your
to
people in
people.
those decisions.
And
Doesn't
I
matter
always,
if the
if you
person is an
remember
individual
the
contributor or
concept of
people
learning
manager,
organization
they
from
can still
Peter Senge,
contribute
where the
to the overall
workplace, whether
vision and
remote or
strategy of the
physical, in
company,
person,
and
recruitment
also
visible,
acknowledging that,
can become a
validating that
catalyst,
contribution
a
also is
place for the person
a
to
culture
grow and to
that might
flow.
increase engagement,
So that's the
and bring
ultimate
maybe more
objective that we should
cohesion
be aiming, and we should
to
stop seeing our jobs
as a
only
sense,
uh,
to people.
a
And
tool
I
to make
always,
money.
if you remember
You know,
the concept of
they're spending
learning
more than
organization
60% of
from
our
Peter
time,
Senge, where the workplace,
which
whether
can
remote or
contribute
physical
to
in
our
person,
world,
this was
to
many
our
years ago,
job, which brings a
can
sense of
become a
flow and meaning
catalyst,
eventually.
a
So,
place for the
last words from
person
everyone,
to
and then
grow
we will
and to flow.
close.
So
How would
that's
you
the
like to say
ultimate
goodbye
objective that we
to our
should be
audience?
creating, and we should stop seeing our jobs only um,
I would just say that
a
if you
tool to
are in a
make
position
money.
of influence in your organization,
You know,
don't
if
be
we are
afraid to
spending more than
look for
60% of
outside
our
help.
times,
Sometimes that fresh
we
set of
can
eyes that can see a
contribute to our
perspective
world
that is
through our job,
it's just
which
hard to see
brings a
if you
sense
are
of
immersed in
flow
it.
and meaning
And
eventually.
finding
So,
people that you
last
trust that
words
can
from
help you,
everyone,
help you
and
guide,
then we
create the
will
culture you
close.
desire, can help you develop people to their
How would you
fullest
like to say
extent.
goodbye
Um,
to our
it's
audience?
money well spent, in my opinion.
Thank you, Ed. Yes, thank you, Sandy.
I would just say that
And
if you are in a
Joelle,
position of influence in your
final
organization,
words.
don't
Yeah, I
be
think
afraid to
it's
look
so
for
nice to
outside
be able
help.
to exchange on this topic.
Sometimes
That's
that fresh set of
definitely
eyes that can see a perspective
going to
that is
matter
just
for a long
it's just
time
hard to
still.
see
And
if
I
you
think
are
maybe
immersed
I
in
would
it.
say if
And
you're in a middle
finding
management
people that you
position,
trust that
I've
can
found
help
myself
you
in a
guide
middle
and create the
management
culture
position in the
you
past. And if you
desire,
are in
can
that,
help
you
you
can
develop
contribute
people to their
to
fullest extent.
the success of your company.
It's money
But
well
also
spent,
to
in my
Ed's
opinion.
point, don't hesitate to ask
Thank you,
for
Ed.
help, really
Yes,
owning
thank you,
that middle
Sandy.
management position, and
And
how can
Joelle,
you bring in the
final
company's
words.
culture to yeah, I think it's so nice to be able to exchange on this
Joanne,
topic that's
I would say
definitely
to the listeners of
going to matter
SCPC
for a
middle
long time
management
still. And I think
employees,
maybe I would say if you're
get
in
them
a middle
coaching
management
for them to be
position,
able to manage their
found
employees,
myself in a middle management
and
position
it
in the
will
past,
come
and if
back
you
to
are in that, you can
with
contribute to
retention
the
and
success of your
happy
company,
and
but
engaged
also to
employees.
Ed's point, don't hesitate to
thank you.
ask for
Which,
help,
my final
really
words
owning that
that
middle
supports
management
all of you,
position,
and
and
especially Joanne,
how can
people are
you bring in
emotional beings.
the
We
company's
want to
culture to
belong.
your team.
Yeah.
that
Thank you.
let's create
Yeah.
that,
Joanne?
I would
that
say
culture, like the
to
culture that
employers out there,
people
invest
want
in
to
those middle
belong.
management
So
employees.
thank you very much, everybody. I
Get them
really
coaching for
enjoyed
them to be
our
able to manage
panel, and
their
thank you very much
employees.
to my
And it
panelists
will
for
just come
being
back to
here.
you
I
in
love to have you in
ways
one
of
room.
retention
So
and
thank you, and we'll do
happy and
this again.
engaged employees.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Which
you.
my final words,
Thank
and that's
you.
towards all of
Bye.
you, and
Have a great
especially
day.
Joanne.
Take care.
People are emotional beings. We want to belong.
Yeah.
That let's create that,
We
that
will. We
culture,
will.
like the culture that people want
Joelle
to
çok tatlı,
belong.
akıllı, akıllı
Okay.
konuşuyor.
Thank you very much, everybody. I really
Bu arada
enjoyed
şey
our
geldi,
panel, and
YouTube'dan
thank you
biriş
very much
geldi.
to my
Biriş
panelists
teklif
for
istiyor
being
benden.
here. I love to have you in one room. So